It's your Locked On Flyers podcast for Thursday, September 29th. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that really does not enjoy the practice shootouts after these games.
Yeah, that was kind of weird.
Always weird to do it when you don't really need to. All right, let's get the show going.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there in Flyers land. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with the brilliant Russ Cohen, who is on Twitter at Sportsology. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. You can follow us on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You'll keep up to date on all the Flyers news and our episodes. You can also email the show at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. On today's show, we've got a little bit of Flyers news and injury updates. We're going to talk about the preseason games versus the Sabres and Caps, and then wrap up with a look at the potential new salary cap and what that could mean for the Flyers. Locked On Flyers is free and available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever you're listening. So subscribe. You'll get all of our episodes here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So we did hear, Russ, about Sean Couturier as promised. And as usual, I think we got little to no information other than that they're not going to do surgery and he's week to week, but not really specifically what's going on with his back.
No, and that's why I figured when I originally heard, like disc problem, and I thought to myself, that's a couple of months. Still what I think. That's a couple of months.
Yeah, I think the other interesting thing that we learned is that Brad Shaw, assistant coach, had some media availability. And I thought this was important, especially going into this game against the Caps, because it was something that I wasn't really fully aware of going into the game against Buffalo, which made a big difference in that he said they haven't done much system work yet at camp beyond tape study, which is apparently normal for what John Tortorella does at training camp. And they won't really look at systems until they get more cuts and get closer to what the NHL roster is going to be. And I think that speaks a lot to what's going on with the discipline of allowing so many opportunities for other teams on the power play so far this preseason. And then, the PK has looked mostly good so far, but the power play has still been a mess. And it sort of lends itself to this. We're not telling them what to do specifically yet. They're just supposed to operate on their hockey instincts, I guess, thus far, to really show what their smarts are to make the team or not. And maybe I'm misinterpreting that, but I feel like that's kind of a good thing to know in evaluating what's going on out there.
Or it's just something they say. Like I'm going to play devil's advocate here because I'm watching these other teams who look like the other teams. And, this isn't a shot at Brad Shaw. He's very good. But I don't know what this team is. And since John Tortorella is not coaching it, and since nobody knows the system, you're basically just telling me they're putting guys on the line and they're going out there and they're just saying, yeah, this is what we want you to do. Go do your best. Like, if that's what you're doing, you're not doing yourself any favors because, again, and they don't have to care what the media thinks, but it's also what the fans think. The fans were mostly bored tonight. Aside from, a moment or two, they were mostly bored, and they're paying money for this. And there's definitely a big disengagement between this fan base and this team and coaching staff, especially right now. Like John Tortorella, I'm sure will eventually win them over, but right now, there's no impact.
Yeah, I do think the two are connected, right? Because if it's every man for himself and you have to work really hard and show me the best of what you have as an individual to make this team, teams still need to practice to get ready for the season and have a system together. And I just to some degree, I understand what he's doing, but they just don't have the time. Even I think
No.
with that week in between the last preseason game and when the season starts, that's not enough to get things together. So I certainly hope it is correct that they're going to really go heavy on the systems stuff coming up soon. And I assume they're going to make some cuts today or tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
So
Well, today, sorry.
yeah, today or tomorrow. So maybe that's when that kind of stuff will kick into gear. But speaking of the two games we watched over the last couple of days versus Buffalo and then against the Caps, we had a bunch of questions we
I
talked
do have
about
one
on
thing I
the.
wanna say about the Buffalo before you get cranked up with that. We were watching that game through their scoreboard. I do wanna point that out, and we did lose sound at least 2 times, maybe 3, but I guess it was better than nothing.
Yeah, I actually rather enjoyed it because there was no graphics on the screen. It was just pure hockey, and I liked that
Mhm.
a lot. But, we did have some questions on the last show heading into these couple of games and things we were looking out for. So I think, you spoke about Isaac Ratcliffe being the elephant in the room in terms of him having to go through waivers. And, he had that initial game against Buffalo to prove himself and then got an additional game because Atkinson wasn't in the game day roster, right? So he got slotted in when Tyson Forster got moved up. So do you think he did it?
No. I don't think he did anything wrong. I just don't think I think the problem with someone like Radcliffe trying to make this team is, and especially with no systems, it's like everything's gonna have to go right for him to be able to have some sort of impact, and a lot of things were going wrong in both of these games. The Flyers only had moments of good in both of these games, so I can't blame the guy.
Yeah, he just wasn't given the right situations to
No.
really do what he does best. I mean, he did get physical at some point. I saw he
Mhm,
had a couple good like poke checks with his stick using his frame
mhm.
to be able to, get in the way of things defensively, I thought, but especially more in the Buffalo game than in the game against the Caps. But
Yeah.
yeah, I just don't think he had enough time and space to really shine at all, which is really unfortunate. I think one of our other questions, or more of a statement, I guess, was that Noah Cates would be a lock for this lineup, or a prediction, I guess I should say. And I think in that game against Buffalo, he was the one guy that really stood out positively
Yeah.
in that game. And it's just every game, it seems like more and more likely that he's a lock.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to other media members, we're all convinced he should be a lock, like, it shouldn't even be a question at this point. Uh, right now, he's one of their best players. I mean, that's the way it is. I mean, it might change when the season starts, but right now we can only go with what we're seeing.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and in the effort he put forth on all aspects of his game, with the puck,
Yes.
away from the puck, special teams, 5 on 5, he was, I think, as good as he can be in all of those situations, and it really stood out a lot
Yeah.
in that Buffalo game. So I'm really happy for him, and I certainly hope it continues. Another question we had is, for the Buffalo game was the James Van Riemsdyk, Morgan Frost, Travis Konechny line. And, they weren't entirely successful in that game. I mean, that Buffalo game was a bit of a struggle, but I thought there were some moments where it seems like there's some potential for that line.
I think there's some potential. The thing that was bothering me about JVR was he was getting out muscled a lot in the crease. Now, whether that's just because it's preseason, he's going to give a better effort during the regular season, I have no way of knowing that.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but I think, the combination at least looks like they complement each
Yeah, I
other to
agree with
some
that.
degree.
Yeah.
That there's some individual moments of weakness. I thought Travis Konechny was shooting more like he wanted to in that
Yes.
situation. I think having Frost with him as support helps him in that because
It
he
does. He
knows that
needs a high
Frost can
skill guy.
battle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
Yeah,
needs
so
a
I think that's super helpful for Travis Konechny to have Morgan Frost there. Um I also wanted to talk about Wade Allison. He played in the game against the Caps, and man, we always talk about him. Is he going to stay healthy or
Hmm.
not? And it was scary because he missed a couple of shifts after a hit. But he did come back into the game, and much like Noah Cates was in the game against Buffalo, I thought Wade Allison was the standout in the game against the Caps.
Yeah, he gave the most effort. If not for that check, they wouldn't even have gotten the one goal that they did. He was their most energetic player. He was the player that played with the most desire and heart. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, I think so too. And he can be pretty zippy out there as well. So
Mhm.
always like watching him play, but always am nervous at the
Yeah, you
same
have to be.
time. All right, we are going to switch over to the defensive side of things for a little bit in the next segment, but first we are going to hear about our friends at Bet Online.
BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news and podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you could find. As always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering info, including live betting, esports, and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet online where the game starts.
All right, so we had a potential look at what the Flyers defensive core is going to shape up to be between the two games. But in the game last night against Washington, we really had what our top four is right now. So with Provorov and Tony DeAngelo as the top pairing, and Travis Sandheim and Rasmus Ristolainen as the second pair. And I gotta say, it was not great, Bob.
It really wasn't. I thought Sandheim played fine. I thought Provorov played fine. Ristolainen, for some reason, on a few plays, even though he was trying to move the puck up the ice, he had his back to the play. I didn't understand why he would do that. It made no sense. Nick Seeler was making some not great plays. Um, DeAngelo was trying to make like the perfect pass, the perfect seam pass up the middle, and the puck would go through the other end. It's like, is this really the time to do it when you don't have your full NHL team? I mean, I don't know. Was he just trying to show off in front of the home crowd? I mean, maybe, but I mean, again, it didn't make the whole defense as a whole failed. It did because the Caps owned the puck. They were faster. They had the puck up the ice much quicker, and the Flyers were playing catch up and getting outshot as usual.
Yeah, and Risto made a really dumb move with the puck, that led to the Caps' 3rd goal in that
Okay.
game, and, I just there was some poor decision making overall, and
Mhm.
I think you're right that with Tony DeAngelo, he let, like, perfect get in the way of good.
Mhm.
As you would say, I think, and he was trying too hard with his shots that just weren't going, which is
Yeah.
supposed to be his bread and butter, right?
Right, right.
And he was just like his aim was off, or he would hit it, straight into the
Yeah, his
goaltender
aim
or
definitely
miss.
was off.
It was really off, and that was very concerning to me because if that's the thing he's supposed to be good at, then I think we're in a little bit of
You
trouble
do
there,
I
but
mean, here's something that we hadn't talked about that needs to get talked about, I guess. Sometimes when a player comes and plays in front of their home team, it takes time to adjust. Sometimes they try too hard. That could happen to him too.
yeah, I believe that, and I think that it is gonna take some time, but hopefully, again, when maybe they get some systems into place here, they'll have better assignments
See, but
for
don't you
these
see, this is
pairs.
the whole thing now. So these are now built-in excuses as to why things don't look good, and I don't like built-in excuses. I'm watching these other teams, and the Flyers are the ones that had the most vets, not the Capitals.
They did. That was a huge concern for me this game against the Caps especially. I think it was a little bit more even in the Buffalo game.
Yes.
But I think that game played pretty evenly when all was said and done. I think there were ebbs and flows to it, but the Caps game, the Flyers came out really strong, much like they did versus Buffalo, but then it just petered out and never
Hmm.
really came back except for a few small moments here and there. And so I think that really to put together complete games, you have to have this game mentality about how you're gonna run the bench, first
Hmm.
off, and then how just as players, you're going to pace yourself and what happens from shift to shift and what you're planning to do, and are you talking on the bench and trying to figure things out, even if you're getting little to no direction from the coaching, like, are you working together? And we just didn't see as much of that as I would have liked.
No, that's a really great point.
So I think that the defense, I don't know. We did see York and Braun in the Buffalo game, which is ostensibly the third pairing, and that was the top pair in that game. They certainly didn't play like a top pair, but
And the
I
co-
would call it a passable, but barely so.
yeah, but the coaching staff had something to say. I don't know who it was about York's physical play. And we talked about that. And we talked about that maybe being a stumbling point because he's not quite there with that part of his game. And so you do have to kind of wonder now, is the coaching staff going to give him a pass and let him get better as the season goes on with that? Or are you going to go with Sealer and Connaughton because they'll play physical all the time?
Yeah, and I'm just not sure we saw enough from Sealer to warrant him having earned this spot either. That's the
That's fair
weird
too.
thing. It's just so bizarre that there's like 3, maybe 4 guys, if you wanna count Zamula, right, who are
Actually,
potentially
I thought
fighting for that
Zamula was
spot.
good against the, Capitals. I saw good things out of him. I just don't feel like he has a chance, and it's a shame because his passing was
Mhm.
good, he was playing safe, his skating was good. I actually thought Zamula was good.
Well, and that's where I was going with that, right? So if
Okay.
you have 3 or 4 guys fighting for that spot and Zamula is the one that looks the best, like, what does that say about the management side of things and who they're thinking might be a good fit there?
I will say this. In the last few days, I had a discussion with an upper management person from another organization and talking about preseason. And when I said, preseason's really incumbent on the player to make it very hard on the team to cut them, to have, they should be having meetings about them and really, saying, what are we going to do? Because this guy is really like causing a problem here in a good way, like to change our mind. And there's not a lot of players doing that. We've named a couple, but there's not a lot. There's not enough on a team that is definitely not an incumbent playoff team, and on a team that has no real identity other than on the broadcast they're showing every hit possible. Um, where is that? Where is who is the changing the minds of the coaching staff? Who is going to do that? There has to be more than just two players doing that.
Yeah, well, I hope the guys that are supposed to be leaders, like your Kevin Hayes and James Van Riemsdyk, really turn things around from a leadership perspective because I don't think Kevin Hayes played that great either. I think he would admit to that as
Yeah, he had
well.
the
And
one he
he,
had the one play.
hmm
Um, again, players are notorious for sort of playing things halfway at times during preseason. I get that.
hmm
But that wasn't supposed to be happening under this coaching staff, and that's how I'm grading it.
Yeah, I do wanna touch on the goaltending,
Mhm.
before we run out of time on this, and, it was interesting the way the Flyers have done it with 2 periods, 1 period versus, the other teams
Yeah.
have done split games. So, we saw Grosnick for 2 periods versus Buffalo, Sandstrom for 2 periods versus the Caps, and then Sam Ersson got a period of each game. But, I think that Sandstrom looked mostly good. I think that he just got hosed from the play in front of him,
Yeah.
right? Which is the perennial problem with the
No, he's
Flyers
playing
in
with confidence.
goaltending.
I like what I've seen
Yeah.
out of him.
Yeah, and I think, like, Grosenick is a little bit more unstable to me, but overall, I think has played pretty well, again, considering what's in front of him.
I don't know. I might. deviate from that, because like Brandon Bureau figured out, hey, let's just go glove side high, and he did it twice very easily. But then there were also those couple of posts. There was something going on with Grosnick against Buffalo with his glove that he had no confidence in it, and it showed. And I hope that changes. But it does look like, doesn't it look like he's rusty, like he hasn't played net in like 3 years?
Yeah, and that's why I say it felt a little off in terms of being scrambly, but I think that he has periods where he's calm as well and
Mhm.
was tracking well. I just think he doesn't deal with chaos very well, which
And
is
there's gonna
also
be
a bad.
chaos this year, yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem, I think, with him. Whereas I
Okay.
think, Sam Ersson, again, I think played pretty similarly to Sandstrom, but it's
Yeah.
hard to tell when it's just one period coming in cold
Right.
in
He's not
two
getting a look
games.
because he has no chance of making this team. But at least he's getting some work.
Yeah, I think that's a good part of it, but I sure would like to see him start a game so he can
Mhm.
do his proper system and habits and warm up and everything, and then see what he looks like, for a period or two in a game during this preseason.
It's a nice thought.
Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get to see that. But we will have more preseason games to talk about later in the week and going into next week. But up next, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the salary cap. All right, Russ. So we got word about what the salary cap could be looking like over the next several years because the revenue from last season was higher than expected. And so the players' debt, so to speak, is being paid off sooner. So there may be room to raise the cap a little bit more faster than the league had anticipated. So we got a $1 million cap raise this year to 82.5 million. Next year it could go up 1 million to 83.5, but then we'll get some big jumps after that for the 2024-25 season. Could be 87.5 to 88 million, and then the year after that, 25-26, could be about 92 million, which is a big jump. And
It's too much of a jump if you ask me. I mean,
I don't
I
think it'll be that much in
I
that
don't
last
either.
year.
I don't either. Um,
Regardless, I do think it could be helpful to the Flyers. Now, it's going to be helpful to everybody, right? The cap goes up, it helps everybody. But I think that obviously Chuck Fletcher has found it difficult to make cap space. And this is either something that could save him and allow him to make some additional moves if he's still around at that point.
yeah, I'll say this. Looking at the 23-24, so you lose JVR, that's fine. You're still going to have to fill that spot with a player. Uh, Kate, McEwen, Frost, at least two of them hopefully are going to get extended. Brown's a UFA. He's basically a replaceable part. So either way, whatever. Sandheim is looking for that deal, and with the cap going up, he's going to look for real money. Uh, then you have Braun, you don't know, and then Addard and York at that point, looking for a bridge deal. They'll have some to spend, but not as much. The year after is their better year, but they're going to want to start really competing next year. Um, and so they're still going to have some cap concerns here. Nothing like this year, but it's still not fantastic.
Well, and that's to me where the Ristolainen deal is really a problem
Yeah,
because it was too long of a deal. And so to have 5 million tied up in him, well past when these larger increases will kick in, because I'm sure it'll kind of level out again after whatever compensating larger increases
yeah.
happen
Let's
in
say
a
they
couple
keep
of years.
Sandheim. It's going to be 5.5, 6. I'm sure.
Mhm. Mhm. And that's where you're looking at a second pairing of both guys over 5 million,
Yeah,
and that's not even an elite second pairing, it's just an okay second pairing. I mean, Travis
but don't
Sandheim
worry,
could.
Nick Sealer's still on the books that year.
No, he's not in 24-25,
No, I'm talking
right?
23, 24. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, 24, 25, they're in better shape.
Mhm.
Um,
The
but
problem
they're
is they have to make some deals for the year before,
yes.
and so they're good. That's where the crunch is gonna be.
There'll be
Now
a carryover from that we don't know
Mhm.
exactly what it's gonna be yet. So
And the JVR money isn't gonna be enough to cover all of what they need to do.
no. It won't be. I mean, it's right now they're in this spot where they have to have as much good young talent as they could get to help them through with the cap. And that's going to be the big year for that, really is going to be 24, 25, because that's when, uh, like, if they're not going to re sign DeAngelo, their decor at that point, the only players that'll be signed right now, at least, are Provorov and Ristolainen, and then we assume Sandheim. But even just that's just three. It's half your
Yep.
defense. Defense is expensive these days.
It really is, and so that's where I worry, is, like,
Yeah,
how do we
and
get through these couple of lean years to get to that bigger increase to have a little bit more room, and you just have to kinda pray that some of these bridge deals for the younger guys, like a Frost, are gonna be cheap, right? They're gonna
yeah,
be sort of like Owen Tippett deals and, not a Scott Lawton deal.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, will Ryan Ellis come back magically during any of this time? I don't know.
I don't know either. So many questions there. But I think the Flyers are still not in the greatest of shape, even with this help. And again, other teams are going to get this additional cap money too. So they'll
Right.
have the same kind of advantage of signing the best free agents. So it's really going to have to be a build from within process, I think, for the Flyers for the next couple of years still. And Cutter Gautier, I hope pans out, but, I think there's a lot riding on some guys that we still have a lot of questions
Yeah,
about.
Bobby Brink, you got to see how healthy he
Mhm.
is. That's fair. The other thing is, honestly, I'm very surprised, and maybe it'll happen in the next week. But if they're going to keep Sandheim, they should have extended him already. Because if he goes on and has a big season, his price tag goes up way more than they're going to want it to.
Yeah, I certainly hope they figure something out before seasons end, but, I don't know, man. It's gonna be a
No, I
ride
wanted to
on
do
that
before
one.
season starts. Forget about season's end.
Mhm.
At season's end, if he somehow has like 50 points, good luck giving him that 5.5. That's going to go to like 6.5.
Could be, could be. All right, we are going to wrap things up with our Flyers fun thing. And we had actually talked about how John Tortorella was going to work his dogs
Yeah,
into
we
the
knew.
Flyers experience. We knew at some point, and lo and behold, they did get that together, and that Tortorella is doing a thing with 97.5 where he's going to go on once a week on Wednesdays, and so he'll talk Flyers, but then he'll also highlight some dogs that are available for adoption in the area, working with the SPCA and Philly Paws, which is a wonderful organization. If you're looking for an animal, highly recommend Philly Paws. They always have some great pets available, dogs and cats as well. I know Tortorella's a dog guy, but
He
got
is,
to
but we're
throw a word in there for the cats as well.
listen, I'm a dog guy who has 2 cats currently, a rabbit. I have 2 dogs. They're all rescues, so I always support John in this endeavor.
Yeah, so I'm glad they figured out a way
Me
to
too.
do that. So it's Hockey and Hounds is what it's called, and they're putting a dog every week up on the Flyers website under Hockey and Hounds as part of it as well. That's adoptable. So go check that out. All right, that will do it for today's show. We'll be back again on Friday. I'm sure we're going to have some cuts to talk about from training camp and maybe what they're planning for the next couple of preseason games against Boston and the Islanders. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So send in your mailbag questions via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. Plus, we're over on YouTube. So subscribe and comment over there as well. I am Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
You made us your first listen today. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL, where Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. So stay up to date on everything in the hockey world with Locked On NHL, your daily NHL podcast. Have a great day, everyone.